In 2007, Dnepropetrovsk went through the most harrowing 3 weeks that country of Ukraine had seen outside of wartime. 22 days, 21 victims, all killed with so much brutality that the victims had no more teeth left in their skulls to identify them with their dental records. This is the story of the Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs, the fresh-faced teenagers whose crimes would shock investigators, haunt the city for decades, and redefine the meaning of senseless violence in modern Ukraine. This is Evidence Obscured, where facts matter more than confronting lies. If you want pure, unfiltered facts, subscribe because you've come to the right place. Before I begin, I need to apologize for my pronunciations in this video. I'll try my best, but when I do inevitably get them wrong, you're all more than welcome to openly mock me in the comments. But as always, we insist on giving the victims their identities back after their lives were so brutally stolen from them. So my sincerest apologies to any Ukrainians out there. I've tried my best. Secondly, this video is not for sensitive viewers. This case involves some of the most extreme levels of torture against men, women, children, and animals that I've ever come across. I have done my best to blur out the most gruesome details in the photographic evidence, but it's still a lot to digest. You have been warned. So let's rewind to 2007. On the evening of June the 25th, to the city, Dnepropetrovsk in eastern Ukraine. 33-year-old Ekaterina Ichenko was attacked after walking back home from having tea with a friend. She was struck with a blunt object over the side of her head just yards away from her own front door. The next morning at 5 a.m., Ekaterina's mother found her daughter bludgeoned to death within view of her front stoop. Just an hour and a half later, Roman Tatarevich was beaten to death on the park bench where he was sleeping, right in front of the prosecutor's office. He was struck so many times with blunt objects that his face was completely unrecognizable. Police didn't immediately connect the two murders. Ekaterina was hit once over the head. Roman, on the other hand, looked like his murder was one of rage. They were different genders, came from different social classes, and in a city as big as Dnipro, seeing two murders in one night wasn't exactly common, but it wasn't unheard of either. 5 days later, two more people were killed in the same manner. An elderly couple, Evgenia Grishenko and Nikolai Serchuk, were beaten to death inside their home in Novomoskovsk, a suburb of Dnipro. The couple were beaten with what appeared to be a hammer and metal bars. None of their possessions were stolen, and there seemed to be no clear motive for their murders at all. 5 days after that, on the 6th of July, 3 people were bludgeoned to death in the city in a single night. Igor Nechvoloda, while walking home from a nightclub, was found by his mother in his backyard, and Yelena Shram, a night guard walking home from her shift. The killers used the bag of her freshly laundered clothes to clean their weapons before leaving the scene. And in the early morning hours, Valentina Hanza, who worked multiple jobs to support her disabled husband and 3 children, was killed as she left the house for work. Now police were putting the pieces together. Whoever was doing this had all the markings of a spree killer. They moved fast, attacked at random, fell on their victims with extreme violence, and their only motive was death on a large scale as they could possibly manage. Even more alarming, there seemed to be more than one person involved, judging by the amount of weapons used during the attacks. But this was Ukraine in 2007. Sure, technology was around, but CCTV wasn't exactly commonplace. The attacks had no witnesses, no digital trail, and no physical evidence other than the bodies themselves. In other words, police had nothing. Between the 7th and the 14th, 4 people were attacked. 14-year-old friends Andrei Sidyuk and Vadim Lyakov were coming back from a fishing trip at a stream when they were fallen upon by 2 young men armed with a hammer and a metal pipe. Vadim managed to run away and hid in the woods, but Andrei wasn't so lucky. When Vadim ran for help, he was denied medical care for his injuries and promptly arrested. He was beaten and brutally interrogated for days. Police wanted a suspect, and they were hell-bent on beating one into existence if they had to. They held Vadim for 5 days before letting him go because they could not continue to keep a young boy with no evidence whatsoever after the killings continued. First was Nikolai Sheniko and a John Doe on the 11th, then Sergei Yatsenko on the 12th, and Natalia Mamarchuk on the 14th. Sergei wasn't just beaten to kill him, his torture was extended for as long as his body could possibly hold out. We'd later find out that the murder was recorded on a flip phone, and played a major part for the defense in this case when it went to trial. Natalia's murder nearly got the killers caught. Some village children heard her screams, and when they ran over, they saw two young men taking her scooter and riding off. They attempted to give chase, but the killers rode off before they could catch them. Police now had a visual confirmation that there were two killers, young men who were armed with a ball-peen hammer and a pole of some kind. They fled the scene, dumped the scooter when they were far enough away, and killed 3 more people that same day. All of them were so brutalized that their families could not identify them at the morgue. The news outlets were running wild with their reporting. Even to this day, Wikipedia still lists that one woman was pregnant when she was killed and had her unborn child cut out of her stomach. As sensational as such headlines are, I'm relieved to report that no autopsy reports that I could find corroborated such claims. They weren't in the court transcripts either. Now, there's every chance that my translation apps are as useless as my focus before I've had my coffee in the morning. So if there's anyone listening who can read Ukrainian and Russian, feel free to confirm or deny these claims. But I'm leaning toward them being false. But much of the torture was committed while the victims were still alive. That is true. The killers were extending their victims' suffering more and more. Most of their following victims were so severely beaten that they could not even be identified by their dental records because their faces were completely smashed and their skulls shattered. Many had their abdomens cut open, their insides pulled out by the attackers' bare hands, and their eyes were gouged out, all while the victims were still alive and screaming. If you're following, so far that's 15 victims in less than 3 weeks. Some of the victims had their mobile phones stolen and any cash they might have had on them, but this was inconsequential. They left behind valuable items like jewelry and the bicycles and scooters that some of the victims had. So robbery was definitely not the main motive here. They were spotted washing blood off their hands and clothes in streams. Many witnesses saw them attack people and they left trails of blood behind them. These guys were not concerned about evidence. Nothing about their actions were planned, and police were positive that the chaos, the danger, and the blood was what they were truly after. The public didn't go out alone at night anymore. Police patrolled the streets, and more than 2,000 investigators were put on the case. The sketches provided by Vadim, the survivors, and witnesses were distributed across Dnipro and all of its neighboring suburbs and villages. While police ran themselves silly looking for a lead, Yuri Pekotin and Vladimir Ravkovsky were beaten to death, and the body of Vadim Bogdan was found, having been killed a week or more before. A Jane Doe was discovered in the woods. Her time of death was hard to determine due to the heat of the summer. Another John Doe found near some train tracks later that same day was equally decomposed, bringing the total up to 21 murders. One of the victims' missing phones was suddenly turned on July the 23rd, exactly 22 days after the first murder occurred. Police tracked the ping to a pawn shop and arrested the 2 men who were trying to sell it. The 2 boys who were being handcuffed at the pawn shop was a shock to everyone. Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk were 19-year-old buddies who came from wealthy families, did well in school, and who held down jobs. Their friend, Alexander Hamza, was also tracked down that same day and brought into the station. These 3 had been best friends since they were in elementary school, and by all outward appearances were nice young men who were raised in good homes. What the grown-ups didn't know was that these little demons were harboring a deeply disturbing set of behaviors that they kept secret from the world for years. In their preteens, the boys began playing games that tested each other's daring. Igor, who was considered the ringleader of the 3, was afraid of heights, so they'd climb up the highest buildings they could find so that they could stare down to the street below. This little game of dare to dare escalated fast. By the time they reached their teens, they were cutting each other to see who could endure the most pain, scaling condemned buildings, and even killing animals. Killing animals turned into prolonged torture, where stray cats and dogs were hung, stabbed, and dismembered alive. This continued desensitization for violence was bound to spill into the human world eventually. It was just a matter of time. Alexander was the more withdrawn of the 3, and though he joined in with a lot of the daring stunts, he did not like the sight of blood and claimed not to have accompanied Igor and Viktor for any of the assaults and murders. But make no mistake, he was in every other way an accomplice. He knew about what they did. They showed him the evidence. shared the items they had stolen with him, and told him about locations of bodies before police even found them. Starting in April of 2007, Igor and Viktor would drive around in their beat-up little Daewoo Lanos looking for people to kill. Their only criteria was that the person had to be alone, no matter how old or young they were. They'd attack them with hammers and metal rods, run to their car, and flee the scene. 5 people were attacked in those first 2 months before the actual murders, and all would later testify against the 2. A survivor, Lydia Ivanova, was attacked as she was feeding stray dogs. The boys saw that she had fillings in her teeth and stomped on her head to knock them loose so that they could pawn the gold off. But the dogs that she was feeding turned on them, forcing Igor and Viktor to back off. Those strays saved Lydia's life that day, all because she showed them some kindness. She lost an eye, nearly all of her teeth, and crawled to a nearby elementary school with a shattered skull for help. They also robbed 2 stores during this time, but without any bloodshed, that itch that they were looking to scratch wasn't quite satisfied. Alexander was part of these 2 robberies, but declined to join the other 2 when they planned to attack random people. When Yekaterina Ichenko died after only 1 single blow, Igor and Viktor was so elated that they drove around to kill someone else that same night. This was that insatiable thrill that they were looking for all along, and now that they'd started, they weren't going to stop. When the boys were questioned, they admitted to everything on the spot, detailing the murders in startling detail. They outlined exact locations, could tell detectives exactly how many blows each victim received, what they did to them before and after death, and what they stole from them. Items from the victims were found in each man's home, and their personal cell phones proved that they were at the locations of each victim's death while they were being murdered. And to make matters worse, they filmed their crimes on their personal flip phones. Igor and Viktor would later retract their confessions, claiming that they were tortured during their interrogations, but no amount of backtracking could hide the colossal amount of physical evidence on their phones, at their houses, the witnesses, the bloody clothes they still had hanging in their closets. None of them had made any attempt to hide anything. They didn't just record the murders themselves, they attended their victims' funerals just so they could watch family and friends bitterly weeping with grief. Still, with the mountain of evidence tied to them, they headed into the trial anyway, claiming their innocence. The parents jumped on the bandwagon, arguing that the blurry 2007 flip phone footage did not show their sons, that the 3 men in those videos who were mocking, beating, and torturing multiple victims only vaguely resembled their boys. You name it, the defense tried everything they could, each argument more outrageous than the last. National cover-ups, a murder ring protected by the government, that the court somehow fabricated the video, and they threw in every man arrested for a violent crime in the last 2 years into the mix for good measure. The video evidence was so gruesome that the jury and families present in the court ran out vomiting, fainting, and crying. Even the officers, lawyers, and the judge were visibly shaken. The court saw the full extent of the boys' hideous natures. Only Alexander stuck to his original statement, but then again, he was in none of the videos and photos. He only accompanied them on the 2 robberies and was happy to take money and trinkets stolen from the victims. Funny thing here though, some of the video evidence shows Igor and Viktor committing the crimes, while a 3rd man that never steps into the frame holds the phone. Naturally, Alexander and his lawyers never brought up this fact when he was on the stand. Alexander got 9 years in prison for the robberies and for being an accomplice. I think it's safe to say that he got some kind of plea deal for testifying against his best friends. He was released in 2019 and is now married with 2 kids. I won't sugarcoat my thoughts here. I think this sentence was a complete travesty. The courts shouldn't have given him any deal. Sure, he didn't actually kill anyone, but he allowed it all to happen. He filmed it as innocent people were being beaten to death in front of him, and Alexander knew full well the gravity and the depravity of the situation. He deserved more time. Igor and Viktor were given life in prison, guilty on all counts. According to the victims found in their initial confessions, they murdered 21 people, injured 6, and killed countless animals. They were charged with every single human and animal killed or assaulted. 1 year after the conviction, one of the videos shown in the courtroom leaked onto the internet, showing the 6-minute murder of their 19th victim, Sergei Yatsenko. If you're an early 2010s kid, you might have seen it and been scared for life. It's been removed from the main search engines by now, though I'm sure it's still around on some gore site on the dark web. Like I said, it's a traumatizing thing to watch, and I genuinely advise against looking for it. I've seen a lot of hideous autopsies, crime scenes, and a fair number of awful things that humans are capable of. But this is something else. What they did is beyond barbaric. It goes past evil. It's not even within the realm of being called a living being anymore. Not even the most vicious of animals are capable of doing what these kids did. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need a palate cleanser after going through all those reports. There's no sleeping for me tonight, that's for sure. Don't forget to sub and like the video. I'll see you in the next one, people.